Hi there, it's Rachel Martin, and you're listening to Parenting Teens Podcasts. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Parenting Teen Podcasts. This week, I wanted to record an episode about all those sayings that we hear and all those things that we generally think as parents of teenagers that really don't help us, that can make the job just feel so much harder and so much worse. But not only to point out these things that you may or may not be thinking, but what you can actually do about them and why they're things that are going to make this harder for you or for your teen. And overall, it will affect the relationship you have with them. And anyone who listens to my episodes will know that your relationship with your teenager is so key to this part of the journey of raising a child. So I hope these make sense to you. Maybe some of them you will have heard or thought yourself, and maybe some of them not so much. But I just thought it might be helpful to share ways in which you can help yourself and what you can actually do. Hope it helps. So I guess I had to start with the most common, most frequent, stereotypical statement that I hear about parenting teenagers. And it goes along the lines of something like, the teen years are an absolute disaster. You think it's difficult when they're young, just wait till they get to become a teen. And in my head, this is just talk about setting yourself up for a nightmare. It should be no surprise to anyone that if you focus on the negative, your brain is going to search to prove it. Focus on the positive, and your brain searches to prove that. And you choose exactly what it is your brain is focusing on. Focus on how hard it's going to be and how difficult it always is. Or look at some of the positive parts of raising teenagers. It doesn't take much to realise that you can laugh with them. The banter is amazing with a teenager versus someone of the age of 6 who just wants to play. There are so many lovely parts to raising a teenager. And if you choose to look at the negative bits, you're going to find this journey quite a struggle. But if you give yourself a chance to remember those magical moments, the points where they are becoming an adult and how they are becoming independent, and you're so proud to see all the things they're doing for themselves, because that's your child, and your child is growing into an adult. And like it or not, it is something you need to accept. And you can focus on the bad bits, or you can focus on the good. Now, don't become a bit of a strange person and start saying the teen years are the most wonderful ever, but just be a bit realistic and see how many times you're saying to yourself, oh, these teen years are a disaster. Actually, it's just a moment of it that's a disaster. And that's true through raising children all the way. So focus on what helps you, not on what pulls you down. Another classic that I've heard about is, well, they're becoming a teenager, so I better prepare for the worst and then I won't be disappointed. I'm sorry to say that this saying is just not as helpful as it seems. What it does is it means you live expecting this worst case scenario. We like to think it's okay to think of this worst case scenario because you're working out what you'll do if this terrible thing happens. But ask yourself this. Whilst you're working out this worst case scenario, how are you feeling? Happy? Hopeful? I doubt it. Generally, we're miserable. We're miserable right up until the moment we find out if this is actually what happens. And so then the moment actually comes along. And let's say that worst scenario does come true. Okay, great. So now you get to say, I knew it. But does it take the pain away? No. Does it change how you deal with it? No, because you're still all caught up in the emotion. You know, that emotion that you were so desperately trying to avoid with planning through this. So now you still feel rubbish. But the worst part is you have done for weeks because you've been planning this over and over. Alternatively, if you could just trust that you don't know, Have no expectations of what's coming. Or if you feel like you have to work out scenarios, then work out loads of them. Go to the worst end and compare fair. Go to the top end too. I love the way that as people we seem to believe it's going to be terrible or it's going to be amazing, when actually, on average, it usually comes out halfway between somewhere, and that's okay. Another cracker on the teen sayings that we hear: teens don't listen because they just don't respect you. They're just rude. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever said, "Oh, I wouldn't dare talk to my parents like that"? Ever wondered why we say these things? Well, I did, and I'm going to attempt to guess at why you said this. It's probably because your parents, like scabillions of other parents, parented with fear. I wouldn't have dared because the consequence was huge. We now know that parenting like this is not the best way. And also that our parents didn't do it to us because they wanted us to be petrified. It's just that constant roll down of parenting styles that have happened forever and ever. It's what their parents did to them. Now, I'm not saying be a wet washover parent, but don't connect listening or taking your advice with respect. They're growing humans working out how to deal with these massive feelings, and they're trying to prove that they can do it. They can be independent. When things don't go their way, it causes huge emotions. And when they're wrong, it causes even more huge emotions. Now, parenting with fear would teach them how to hide and bury these emotions. But you probably know that what we want is for them to acknowledge them. We want them to acknowledge them for themselves and do something more constructive with these emotions. For them to learn how to respond to their emotions and not just react. And one way you can help with this is to start to release your parenting strings so that there is less for them to react to, less no's in their life. Now, there are two side winds to saying no less as well, which I'll share. One of the side winds you're going to get, when you always used to say no and they missed out on something that they thought that was great, or it turns out that the bad thing didn't happen to the rest of their friends after you knowed them going to meet them, who do you think gets blamed for this? They don't blame themselves that they missed out. They blame you. And now they're learning that they don't get to make balanced decisions. And now they're not learning how to make balanced decisions. They're learning that life is decided by you, and they don't have independence. You decide what they do or don't do. But if you say yes more, then actually they get to make some of these choices. They get to decide what it is that's best for them and see the consequences if it does go wrong. Side note, safety is always something you need to prioritise with a boundary there. Yeses are only for when it is not life-threatening. But there's another win if you say yes more. When you do say no, your child is going to register that you don't say no a lot. So maybe this is more important than they initially realised. Honestly, I want you to do a check. How many times do you say no at the moment? And why do you say it? Is it so that they do what you think is best? Does it really have to be a no? Agreed, if it's for their safety, then absolutely it's a no. But who is that no really about? Natural consequences for teens are how they learn. They let them learn for themselves. And I know your intention is so good. You just want to save them the pain. But this really isn't helpful for a teenager. Unless, of course, it's life risky, then it is helpful. But your role is to help them through the consequence, not to have them believe that consequences don't exist. One of the other ones I wanted to bring up is they say that I shout at them and I'm not. As much as this will be a bit of a short one, it is something I hear quite often. Oh, she shouted at me. Stop shouting at me, when you're not actually shouting. But I want you to take a moment to realise that actually maybe you're right. Maybe you didn't raise your voice. But I bet your face, your posture, and maybe your tone of voice changed just a little. It isn't just the volume of your voice that teens hone in on. If it changes from your normal happy way, they will pick up on it. 80% of what we say isn't with words. So they may not be 100% wrong. Do you know how you behave when you get annoyed? What are the signs on you that you're getting annoyed other than the volume of your voice? I just think it's something that might be worth considering. It'll only take you a second. And my last thing that I wanted to bring up is that as a parent, you can't do right no matter what you say. Now, this is a bit of a long one because it's a double-edged sword. And what do I mean by that? Well, you say they're wonderful, for example, and it's dismissed because you're their parent and you have to say that. Or you try and give them advice and they don't want to hear it. So now you can't compliment them and you can't advise them. So what on this earth are you actually supposed to do? Well, actually, you're still supposed to do both. But my advice is to consider how you communicate this with your teen. This issue comes along because as parents, we hope to see some action from our words. Or maybe we're hoping for just a tiny drop of appreciation or a smidgy positive response for our input. But to understand why this doesn't genuinely happen, you need to get under a teen's skin and thoughts. The key things in a teen's life are that they're trying to prove to themselves and everyone else that they can survive on their own, that they make good choices, and they're good at judging people, and that they're likeable. Now, from that list, notice how they're happy with who they are, that they enjoy the experience of life, and that they learn from their mistakes are nowhere included. And this is right. It's teen development, and it's super, super important. So your words, kind or full of advice, don't help them prove their independence. They actually show that they can't do this. They need your reassurance, or they need your words of advice. So naturally, they don't like it. It shows them that they're still learning, which we all know is very true. But it doesn't mean it's something they're necessarily going to be comfortable with. And it doesn't mean it's something they like to be reminded of. So please stop expecting a different response. Your words sometimes don't fit with what they want. And we all know how it feels when we hear something we don't want to. So the simple answer is to look at how you communicate these words of reassurance or advice. And my advice to you, which you didn't ask for, but I'm just going to give you, is to always ask. Do you want to hear my thoughts on this? Do you want me to help you with this? Or are you just looking to vent it out? Always, always try and ask first, and you will get a much better response from what you're trying to do to support your teen. So these are just some of the tips that I've picked up over time, and some of the things that I think some things that we just trip ourselves up with every now and then. But they are things that you can do yourself that can really help your relationship with your teen, and they'll fit any kind of issue that's coming up. It's all about thinking, how can I do this with my teen in a way they're going to respond to? And the easiest way to find that is to understand your teenager. They're all so different. There isn't rules that fit everybody. But as a parent, knowing how you can support your teen and build the relationship you have together will always be super important. So don't trip yourself up with stupid sayings you see across social media. It's a wonderful journey and it can be really enjoyable. So help yourself to see it as much as you can. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much if you've listened this far. I really hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Don't forget to never miss another episode. Please click the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on. As always, if you have any feedback or ideas, please do get in touch. I always love to hear from anyone who's been listening to these. You can find me at teentherapistonline.com for my website, or Facebook and Instagram, I'm Teen Therapist Rachel Martin. I will always reply, so please, if you have anything you want to let me know about or ask about, please do just get in touch. And if you're feeling really, really lovely and you're listening on Spotify, you could leave me a review, which would really mean the world to me. Once again, I'd just like to say thanks, and I hope you have a super lovely day.